me, your host Leani, back for another episode of I Got Nothing, a podcast for exhausted writers. Welcome, fellow exhausted writers. I am very excited. Well, I'm always excited when I'm doing these podcasts, but I'm particularly excited today because I will be sharing another topic that was sent to me via Tumblr eons ago. But I wrote it down and I saved it because it's a very, very important topic. And I think it's something a lot of us writers struggle with. And that is writing an ending. Oh boy. So, for those of you in the know, when you're writing a story, apparently we're supposed to write a beginning, middle, and end. That's kind of how that's supposed to go. And as some of my fellow writers can attest, there are certain areas that are a little easier than others. And for a lot of us, writing an ending is a big one. It is one of the hardest parts of writing, at least for myself. And I feel like it's something that doesn't get as much attention as it should in terms of writing advice. I see it on occasion, but I feel like it warrants a little more discussion because the thing is, you can end your writing, you can end the story, but the key is giving your readers a satisfying ending. So first we're going to talk about ending in general. Let's not even get to the satisfying ending part. Let's just focus on ending the damn thing. I would have to say, until I finished writing my first novel, which was in 2013, I had never ended a original work before. I ended fanfics. I wrote a lot of fanfics and still do. And that I found easier to end. But for some reason, anytime I wrote something that was mine, that was an original idea, it was so hard to figure out how I wanted to end it. So my first book was supposed to be the first book in a trilogy. It was the Mordia trilogy, and the first book was called Blood. And I think ending that was a little easier for me because it was supposed to continue into book 2 and 3. Unfortunately, I kind of moved away from that topic that I wrote about, and I didn't really have much interest in continuing it after. And don't at the moment. Maybe I will down the line. But for me, that ending was a little easier because it was supposed to continue, so I didn't have to tie everything up. I could leave loose threads, and I had to leave loose threads because it was supposed to continue into another book. However, for books that are standalones or don't have sequels or what have you, writing an ending can be a really daunting task because, as I said, there is so much you need to wrap up. You know, you have your main plot, your B plot, possibly C or D plot, depending how big the book is, and you have your characters, and you have to find a way to take this story, this narrative, and make it stop. As most writers can attest, we could keep going. We could keep writing and editing forever and ever and ever if you let us. Which, of course, is not conducive to putting out a novel that's supposed to be a standalone because you kind of have to end it at some point. I think there is one thing that I've noticed a lot in storytelling, not necessarily in books per se, but definitely in movies and television, now that we are in such a media-heavy day and age, is that there seems to be some kind of emphasis on needing to throw some kind of plot twist or something of that nature into your story at the end so that readers or watchers or whoever, quote, don't see it coming. I think that's bullshit. Quite honestly, I don't think your story needs to have a plot twist in order to end. If you have one planned and you had it planned throughout the narrative and you've kind of laid those breadcrumbs already, then by all means go for it. If you think of a plot twist as you're finishing the story, which has happened to me numerous times, that's totally cool to go with it too. Just make sure you go back into the story and just kind of make sure those breadcrumbs are there. So it doesn't seem like it's coming out of left field. I know for me personally as a reader, when I am reading a book and I start picking up these little hints of things and my head is going, oh, I bet this is going to happen. I bet this is going to happen. And like I get through and then that thing does happen. I'm not disappointed. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. I totally got what you were putting down. Like I am so proud of the writer, and I'm proud of myself for picking it up. Because I'm not the best at picking up clues. At least not verbally. Definitely writing I'm really great at. Verbally, not so good at picking up the hints. You gotta tell me straight out. But when I'm reading and a plot twist comes and I saw it coming, most of the time there's just like this intense satisfaction that I saw it coming. My favorite thing is when I see the plot twist coming and then it's immediately followed up with something I didn't see coming. That's always fun too. But don't feel like you have to force any kind of narrative change or plot twist or anything like that to make your ending meaningful. I think the most important thing about writing an ending, which I mentioned earlier, now we're coming back to it, is making sure that it's a satisfying ending for yourself and for the readers. And I feel like in order to do that, in order to really set that tone and set the readers up for that ending, you need to have some idea of that ending ahead of time. I know a lot of us writers are pantsers. We just fly by the seat of our pants and we don't do an outline or anything like that. And before I started ghostwriting, I never did outlines. And now for my personal stuff, I still don't do outlines really. I just do bullet points. But I always have some idea of the beginning and the end. For me, the middle is the hardest part. Like, I know where we start and I vaguely know where we want to end. I don't know how I'm going to get there. So for me, the middle is a little bit harder, which is so funny because it used to be endings and now I'm like, no, I know how I want it to end. I just don't know how I want to get there. But if you start off writing with, you don't even have to have it planned out. I'm not saying like you need to start with like bullet points of how you want the thing to end. Like, no. But if you at least have some kind of idea, then it gives you a focus. Then it gives you a goal. It gives you something you're writing to. Like you're writing to get to that ending that you see. And honestly, your ending is going to change. It is. It's going to change. I feel like very few writers have an ending in their head and stick to that same exact ending once they're done. Because your characters are going to grow and they're going to change, especially in ways you don't anticipate. So your ending should change and reflect that. There are so many long-running TV shows that have terrible, terrible endings because that was the way the writers envisioned the ending from the beginning. And they neglected to realize the 9 years of the TV show didn't lend itself to that ending anymore. How I Met Your Mother, I will always be bitter about that ending. Anyways, so just having an idea is helpful, but also being open to change, being open to your story and your characters changing the ending that you have in mind. I'll give a perfect example for the first screenplay I ever wrote. I am turning it into an audio drama. But before I got that far, after I wrote it and I was satisfied with it, my husband and I sat down and we did a read-through of the script, just the two of us. Because I hadn't heard the story out loud, and it had changed so much, and what it meant had also changed. I didn't go into writing the screenplay going, well, it's going to be an allegory for depression and anxiety. It just sort of morphed into that. So when we were reading and we get to the end, and I kind of read through this little like epilogue I had written, my husband kind of gets this look on his face, and I'm like, what is it? And he's like, no, the ending just doesn't feel right. And of course, me being a writer, I was immediately offended. And once I kind of calmed down a bit, I was like, okay, well, what do you mean? And he was like, well, if this is a allegory for depression, the ending is very like, and then they get married when she moves on, and like they have a kid and blah, blah, blah. Because originally that's kind of what the story was. It wasn't supposed to be an allegory or anything. It was supposed to be a love story. So I ended it like a love story. But by this point, it had gone through so many different iterations and so many edits and became something so much deeper to me that it wasn't a love story in the traditional sense anymore. It was something else entirely. And so as much as I loved that ending and pictured it from the beginning, I had to let it go because it just didn't fit anymore. It didn't fit the story. It wasn't the message I wanted to give. And I ended up finishing the story with the female character's final monologue, which she has this whole monologue that is very parallel to the main character's monologue in the beginning. Hers is just her version of it. And when I used that as an ending, it actually made a wonderful bookend to the story. It showed the progression of her character and talked about her moving on when he is not around anymore and what that means. And it was so much better. And like I admitted begrudgingly to my husband that, yes, you're right. This is a better ending, to get rid of that. I hope one day I'll share the story with you if I could ever finish it. Recording and editing an audio drama is hell and takes forever, just so you know. And I don't know why I wrote so many monologues. I hate myself now. But getting back to the point, I had to change the end of the story, even though I planned it that way for years before I even wrote the screenplay. It didn't fit anymore. It didn't fit because the story became something completely different, so I had to adjust the ending to fit the story I ended up telling. And it became a much more powerful story. I remember when we did the final read-through with all the voice actors, and the main female character, when her monologue finished, actually when it started, everybody at the table who was done reading was just kind of like, oh man, because she was using a lot of the same wording as the male character, and they heard the parallels. And when it finished, we all just kind of sat there and we're just like, hell yeah. And that was a great feeling for multiple reasons, because I had been so worried about that ending, but hearing other people listen to it made me realize that it was the right call to make to change it. So you can have some kind of idea or bullet points or however your process is. Even just having the idea in your head of how you want it to end, just don't write yourself into that box. Don't feel like you have to tell a story a certain way to get to that specific ending. Tell the story you want to tell and let the ending speak for itself. I think a big thing is, if you don't know how your story is going to end, then your readers won't know till they get to it either. So if it's very apparent from the beginning that you just kind of threw this ending together and kind of didn't go back and edit or anything like that, or just was like, yeah, this should work. If you don't have a goal in mind on where you want to go, then when your readers get to the ending, it's going to take them by surprise, because if you didn't know how you wanted it to end, they sure as hell aren't going to know how it's going to end. And if it's a mystery, that works to your advantage. If it's not, then there's a problem. To circle back to what I said before, nothing ruins a story experience more for me than an ending that makes no goddamn sense. Looking at you, Game of Thrones. We all know that last season was shit. Because they were trying to rush. They were trying to do the whole plot twist thing and kind of surprise their viewers. And what we got was an incoherent ending that made no goddamn sense and made us all feel like we wasted 8 years. Wow, a lot of tangents today. I feel really passionately about endings, apparently. The whole idea of no spoilers and can't let people know what the ending's gonna be, to the point where you don't leave those breadcrumbs. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. I want to be able to consume some media, written or visually, and be like, cool, I have some idea of where I think this is gonna go. Instead of sitting there going, what the fuck is any of this? What am I watching right now? That is like the surest way for me to just nope out of whatever I'm watching or reading. If I'm just like, I don't know what's happening, I can't follow anything, and I don't see where this is going to go, then there's a problem. And I'm just like, nope, and I just give up. And all of those things I just listed is why writing an ending can seem so daunting. I wish there was an easy trick of the trade that I can be like, yes, just do X, Y, and Z, and you'll for sure think of an ending right away. All I can do is share my experiences and share what's worked for me. Definitely the bullet points of this is where I want to start and this is where I want to go helps, because it gives me some kind of roadmap. But as long as you have that setup and you have the payoff at the end, as long as you make your writing mean something to the characters and to the readers, then you're gonna be fine and you're gonna think of an ending. And the ending's gonna be great. If you keep that in your mind, you can always go back and edit. I know. Editing is a pain in the ass. We all struggle with it. I like editing. For me, the hardest part is putting something on a blank piece of paper. But even I, as much as I like editing, it's a very love-hate relationship. Because I love being able to go back and flesh things out to have that ending make more sense. And remember, you can do that. You can absolutely do that. Write an ending, get something on paper, then read your story and ask yourself, does this ending work? Do my characters reach a satisfying conclusion? Are the readers going to be left with questions that they shouldn't be left with? And if your ending doesn't really work after you ask those questions, do some editing. Maybe set it aside for a little bit. I know when I read things immediately after finishing them, I don't really process it right away. So I have to put it aside for a couple of days and then come back to it. Or a couple of years, in the case of my current work in progress. Where I kind of have the same problem, actually. I have a loose ending, but it doesn't mean anything right now because I haven't laid the breadcrumbs for it yet. And speaking of endings, that's all I got on that subject. As I said, this topic was submitted through Tumblr. I will say it every podcast. I love getting topics from people. from listeners because it gives me an idea of what you guys want me to talk about, and then I don't have to think of the topic. I really like not having to think of topics. I love when people give me topics. I'm like, yes, one less thing to do. But this has been another episode of I Got Nothing, a podcast for exhausted writers. You guys can find me at Instagram, Facebook, my website, leanilopez.com, Twitter. I'm everywhere. Just type in Leani Lopez. I'll pop up. Alrighty, lovelies. Talk to you next time. Bye.